Hello, this is Alan Wheeler, and my apologies if you're seeing this video before I cut off the short delay at the beginning. This is my YouTube channel where I discuss tarot and spirituality, and I'm here at my altar with incense burning and a candle glowing away here. Here's my statue of the Morrigan in the background, bamboo plant, and some other accoutrements here. So the title of this video may be something like, does the divine really care about sex? Or something like that. The real question might be a little long for a YouTube video title, but it's why do we have so many religious and spiritual prohibitions around sexuality? So I drew a runestone and 3 tarot cards to address this issue. Before I show those and allow those to provide some food for thought, just some preliminary background. Let's look at kind of the Western traditions and the Eastern traditions. So I'm most familiar with various teachings in Christianity, but I think most of us would be familiar with the idea that there's rules for holiness, perhaps taken to the extreme in certain holiness movements where the hymnline, the exact hymnline, is actually tied to spirituality. We're also all familiar with marriage vows, or priests, nuns, and so on, who make vows of celibacy. So it seems like a kind of consecration in that case, all kind of amounting to holiness or sacredness. Also in the West, I remember from back in my high school days, I was not a football player, but some friends of mine were told by the coach to not to have sex before a big game, as if that would drain their testosterone or their drive to win, perhaps create a kind of a hangover of some kind. So less familiar to me would be the Eastern spiritual approach in something like Buddhism, but similarly you have priests and monks who maintain celibacy. I think the purpose may be a little different. From the things I read, it's more about, it's a hindrance to enlightenment, really, since desire is what drags us down. Then ascending above that, those desires and sensuality, would be a pathway to enlightenment, and craving, of course, would amount to suffering or translate into suffering. For the ordinary people, not monks or priests or anything like that, it just seems like another guideline for good living. And so although precepts would say don't have sexual misconduct, it would be no more serious than other precepts like against wrong speech and things like that. And the whole guilt complex would be that we might see in the West might be less a concern or less an effect. However, similar, now the similarity between the cultures would seem to be the prohibitions against adultery, where there's a real breaking of faith and trust. And so in the Buddhism, it's the real the kind of the serious misconduct is where there is sex with people under protection, whether it be father and mother, or family, or marriage. Now, the bit of the wild card would be the tantric yoga or the sexual yoga. I think the term tantra gets tossed around a bit. So, again, from what I read, the for the majority of practitioners, that's not a physical practice. And so for the majority that I read about, it's more involving meditative visualizations and perhaps the beauty or the sensuality helps trigger or enhance that trance state. I will say that as I was thinking about these things, and a memory came to me from back in college, and a friend of mine would periodically date another student who by far outclassed him. She was out of his league. He didn't really stand a chance, but a few times he was able to actually go out with her or study with her, and she became fuel for him to encourage him to graduate. So my buddy kind of built up this dream girl, and it just seemed to motivate him. And he told me about this. He said she got him through college to graduation. So I think we're familiar with the songs about dreaming and how that is a powerful energy source, perhaps. So with these kind of thoughts in mind, I did draw 1 rune and 3 tarot cards. My full disclaimer is I'm not an authority on this subject. I actually saw some YouTube videos by others that got me thinking, that led me to this line of thought. But just to get myself thinking and into further research, again, my question is, does the divine care about human sex? Why are there these religious or spiritual kind of cutoff points or prescriptions? So the rune that I drew was Isaz, which means ice. And 2 thoughts came to mind, and I'll probably have to sit with these longer. I just drew these earlier today. One thought, ice means stability or stasis. So maybe from a social perspective, and from that kind of that Western standpoint, it creates that stability in the society, in the group, what have you. It's as a social construct, perhaps. The other thought that came to mind is that plateau, that kind of hangover, that 4 of Cups, lethargy, and satiation, that can come about maybe in the personal level, that the coach did not want those football players in that lethargic, satisfied state, perhaps. So two approaches there. I'll have to think about that. Now, the first card I drew was Ten of Wands, and I suppose there's two ways of looking at this one as well. And one is, again, on the social level, is that the rules and the prescriptions and all these parameters, the rigid law can become burdensome here. And it's kind of, I just see this guilt, this oppressive guilt being carried by this person. So that might be one approach. And the other could be just the burnout. So one extreme, and then on maybe the other side of the spectrum, it's that burnout that comes from overindulging, perhaps, as all those wands have been fired up, and the character here reaches that state of weariness. So that could be the effects of both kind of the legalism on one side, and on the other that free license, and both kind of leading to a kind of oppression, whether addiction on the one side or the guilt on the other. Now, the second card I drew was the Two of Cups, and this seemed the positive idea that maybe the kind of the rules may be different with different social constructs, but whether you have marriage or even a group that's set up and it's what is it called, polyamorous, with a kind of different constructs, or in some societies the homosexuality is very accepted. But regardless of the specific rules, the purpose, it seems here, is the harmony of the Two of Cups. So no one wants a loveless marriage. No one, I think, would applaud a loveless sex, perhaps. But anyway, maybe this shows that important aspect of these guidelines. And one of the reasons, or one of the ways, and maybe I misphrased that, maybe this is just a positive expression, between the people involved, when there's harmony and caring and sharing going on there. And that's when it would be spiritual. The last one is the only major arcana that I drew, the Star. And so here, you see the Spirit being poured out both on land and lake, and the familiar star of hope or faith guiding through the night. And so this could kind of speak of the possibility that maybe the Tantric Yoga suggests, that there is the possibility for spiritual moisturizing, so to speak, that there can be the open heart, the open mind, the open will, and maybe the body involved as well. And so this may be that sacredness, somehow maintaining that sacred space using the kind of maybe a liminal experience, not entirely in the physical, not entirely in the spiritual, where something of the energy is taken captive to sacred purposes. So I'm going to, if I talk more, I'm going to go beyond my knowledge and experience there. So let me stop. Thanks for watching, and as always, I hope you feel connection with people in your life, on your with online community, and on your spiritual path, whatever that may be. Take care.